to realize that this is a series of lectures on the general theme of the challenge of painting, or if you want, the limits of painting, or even somebody suggested the possibility of painting also. Anyway, last time we saw one of these limits, if you want, how to express speech. But each time you will see, finally, artists find a way to circumvent, I would say, the problem, and even sometimes it have a long tradition behind, like, for instance, speech, the idea of writing on the painting what you want to say, or what you want even to suggest that the personages who are represented there are saying. Today we'll deal with movement, and of course movement, again, should be rather treated by theater, if you want, or even by film for today. And if you think of the traditional genre in painting, for instance, like portrait and still life, landscape, what we have habitually, it's exactly the opposite of movement. We have a kind of a snapshot, if you want, on one instant, let's say, of a model who is posing for a painter, or of this still life. Of course, it will not move much during the process of painting. The same with landscape, and so you could say that this is where the painting is at ease in a way. And to illustrate that, I will start with this one of these numerous portraits of Madame Cézanne done by her husband. And you could see by her face that she's a little bit fed up of this this type of work that he imposed on her. And he's reported to have tell her, he was not a very nice man, but anyway, and certainly not a very feminist type of artist. And he says, Madame, ne bougez pas plus qu'une pomme. Don't move more than an apple. So if there is a good case of where the person is transforming an object, this is one. And of course, she resented a little bit of that, and it shows in her picture. Ne bougez pas plus qu'une pomme. That means behave a little bit like a still life. Don't try to be expressive or something like that. Just be. And we know that he was very often asking for a long session of repetitious just to draw, for instance, a sleeve or things like that. So it must have been quite difficult. So what we are seeing, in fact, it's like Mrs. Cézanne solidified in one moment and eternalized, if you want, like this, in that specific instant. You could have the same thing also with still life, and I thought of this famous Caravaggio, the basket of fruit, because why? Because the fruit have been there a long time also. You can see by the marks on them and all this, and even the shriveling leaves, there little insects have been eating all that, so probably the still life that he had in front of him was there for a long time in order to if we go now closer to our days, for me, the ultimate snapshot, let's say, of when you have this idea of instantaneous view was this photo of an artist. It's difficult to classify him, which is French and Jewish, but so that's why he pronounced his name Yves Klein and not Klein, like we'll read it, Yves Klein. And Yves Klein have made this photo in which you see him on the top there, flying in the middle of midair, and hoping to fall on his feet. And in the street, you have a guy on a bicycle who's going like this peacefully, not knowing that this crazy man is jumping like this in the void. It's very recently that I learned, and you say you are stupid not to have suspected it before, that this is called a trucage. This is not a real photo. It's two photos put together. I thought, for my sanity, that we know that Yves Klein was a famous judoka. So I said maybe he's clever enough to reestablish his position and fall on his feet from there. But no, what he did the photographer is Monsieur Harry Strong, one of his friends. He proceeded in 2 times. So he photographed the scene that you see with the man on the bicycle, and then he asked if he had to jump on a series of mattresses that were put on the floor, but maybe from this height only, and he photographed him, and then he glued, of course, the image. At the time, you didn't have Photoshop, but you could manipulate a little bit the picture and to do this type of presentation. But okay, then again, it seems each time what photo or painting can do is to fix the movement and to present us just an instant of it. In fact, photography will be the key solution to begin to understand how you can express movement in painting especially. And this is what we will call chronophotography. It's the idea that you can take many views rapidly of a movement and then to analyze it like this in successive view. Or you can leave your objective open of the camera, and then you will have somebody passing in front of it, and then you will get a kind of blurred image of it. These were the 2 solutions suggested by the camera, and of course the great discoverer of that type of problem is Étienne Jules Marey in France. And Étienne Jules Marey was a scientist. He was not an artist, in any way. He was obsessed by the idea of analyzing movement with his camera. And he developed, in fact, machines that were able to do that because he was working at the end of 19th century, beginning of the 20th. So at a time when it was not so sophisticated. And he succeeded to make a machine who could take many photos very rapidly of something in movement. And he started by studying, for instance, the flight of birds. One example of that is this famous photo of the pelican flight that you see at different stages like this. And he could then try to analyze how this bird can fly. A pelican fly relatively slowly, so it was not too bad not too hard to photograph, and with big wings, and he could see better the movement. And then he had the idea of creating little figurines in bronze of a pigeon this time, with 11 positions in one part of his flight, if you want. It was always this idea of analyzing movement through photography, but now also eventually even through little sculpture like that. The sculpture are in bronze, are on a little pedestal, and they are organized like this as it happens in his photo, in order again to solidify it. He invented also a machine that he called the zoetrap. The zoo means animal, if you want, and trop means movement. It is a cylinder that you have to imagine that could roll, that could be animated like that. So just to give a blow on it, and then from the slit on the right, on the side, you lower your face, if you want, and you see through the slit these little sculpture of seagull inside, and you have the impression that it's one seagull who is flying. We have, in fact, almost at the beginning of the idea of filming. It's before that we were able to make real film, but nevertheless, the idea is there. How to capture movement, you see, on a photographic plate. So this is, of course, very close to it. He was interested also of analyzing the same way human movement, not only birds, but also people. Like, for instance, here, he left his camera open and make many successive photos of a man jumping above a kind of fence like this. And this idea of creating what he will call finally chronophotography. That means that you integrate chronos, you integrate time in your photography, then you could really represent the movement in a certain way. And this is the first way to have many pictures of the same event taken very fast, and then to be able to reconstruct the movement. You understand also the influence of the chronophotography had on painters like, for instance, Duchamp. The famous nude descending a staircase is, in fact, a reflection of Marcel Duchamp of the technique of Marais that he knew, he learned about. It was published in magazine at the time, like La Nature and things like that. So he could see exactly what he could do in painting. So it's one personage going down a stair and making this movement, if you want, analyzed in a kind of more cubistic way, but inspired by Marais. And indeed, in the photo of Marais, you do find or men climbing a staircase instead of descending it, or even women descending a staircase. So now we are very close, of course, of what the painting of Duchamp suggests, that you could, from many pictures like that, succeed to do this type of suggestion of a descending movement. At the time, Duchamp is a little bit depressed. You have jeune homme triste dans un train, things like that. We see by the picture that he's doing. So this idea of a descending movement is not by hazard in his thematic, if you want. It's a thing that he wanted to suggest. So not an ascending movement, but rather one of recession. And one photograph who have, I think, well understood what Duchamp wanted to do is this Eliot et Lobson, which is a photograph who works for Life magazine. So he's an artist, if you want, but he was also a kind of journalist photograph. And he has Duchamp himself to go down a staircase. So the guy that you see here is Duchamp. And in fact, it's a very good transposition of the painting, even better than what the Marais picture suggested. You are closer to it. It's one personage descending a staircase. The other solution that was suggested by chronophotography was to leave the camera open for a while and let the ear and horses move in front of the camera. So now you don't take many little pictures, but you leave the objective open for, let's say, 3 seconds or 4 seconds or whatever, the time that so what you obtain, it's a feeling of movement, but much blurred. You don't have a clear image like you have in the little photo of the man ascending or the woman descending the staircase of Jules-Étienne Marais, but you have a feeling of movement, but blurred. And one artist who have exploited that, if you want, today, it's Gerhard Richter, who have made very, very often kind of this effect of blurred photography, like you see here. Emma acted, if I understood well, is nude. Treppel is a staircase. So it's the title of Duchamp, Nude Descending a Staircase, but Emma is the name of the girl who, I think it's his wife or something, that was photographed for as a model for a painting, because this is not a photograph, it's a painting. And so this is the other solution. Or you have many little pictures, or you have one blurred image, but in both cases, you suggest movement. Okay, so that will be my introduction, let's see, to see how it goes. If we go back now to Canadian subject matter, you will have a first way of expressing movement in a landscape, for instance, in a very more traditional way that what the chronophotography suggests. And I thought, since it's in the air, oh oui, this is wonderful. Just before getting to my Canadian subject, I just want to comment, first of all, because I have a dog exactly like this, and I can guarantee you this is well observed. It's exactly, you never know where they are, and suddenly and they go like this. And the title here is interesting because it's called Dynamism of a Dog on a Leash. It's exactly the opposite of Duchamp. Duchamp is not dynamic like that. The movement that Duchamp represents is a descending movement. Here, a man like Giacomo Balla, who belongs to the futurist movement, in the contrary, wanted to suggest dynamism and modern life, let's say, with movement and all that. He will paint not only dogs, but also cars and trains and things like that, and speed, and all these themes, you know, will be important, and always seen positively, not like Duchamp, like something like crumbling or going down. You understand the difference? Okay, I go back now to my artist from Canada. The first way that you will have an inkling of at least the need to express the movement, you will find it in landscape. And I thought of presenting to you some examples from Marc-Aurèle Fortin. First of all, Fortin was just exhibited in Quebec City. The exhibition is over. It will be presented at the McMichael Center of Canadian Art soon. And so he's in the air, if you want. He's a very popular painter among collectors, and we have here at the museum, as you know, a little room for Fortin works, because we inherited of the collection that was in the Musée Marc-Aurèle Fortin in the Vieux-Montréal. Maybe some of you have visited that and seen it. So Fortin is much more traditionalist in approach, but here, for instance, he certainly is dealing with this problem, how to express the change, the rapid change of weather. You see, on the right, you have already the rain falling from the sky, and on the left, the sky is still very bright. And in the bottom left, you have a guy who will open his umbrella and running from the, just in the little corner there. You have the train also who goes in the same direction than what we feel like the movement of this storm that is beginning and that is coming in the landscape. It starts from the right and goes toward the left. And that explains also this kind of éclairage or kind of dark luminosity that you have on the landscape. So this is a more traditional way to deal with movement, say to suggest it, to make a certain polarity here in the picture, and to say, okay, it will move from rain to sunshine. It will slowly, the sunshine will disappear, and the place will become darker. Yeah? Even in a painting like this, you still have a little bit of that effect, if you want. I says even in this, because at first sight, it seems very static. It has nothing to do with this movement because of this huge tree, the elm tree of the vicinity of Montreal at the time, Pont-Villot. And this is the place where Fortin was living in Montreal, but he likes to go around like this in Houndsake. And in those days, in the 20s or the beginning of the 30s, all this region was almost like country. I remember in my childhood, above what we used to call Crémazie, there was gardens. No houses whatsoever up to, let's say, the river. You had garden there. And so in between, of course, Montreal has developed a lot, but that means that if you cross the Rivière des Prairies and you go in the north of Montreal, even in what we call Laval today, you will have, at the time, this type of landscape with this big elm tree. The elm had almost disappeared from the countryside because it was eaten by a bug. Suddenly, this bug was carrying apparently a fungus that was lethal for these big trees, and we don't find them as much as before. But at the time, they were like the symbol of stability, if you want, of rootedness, and they didn't suggest anything like movement. But even in this painting, if you look on the right side, you have lightning falling on a church there, who is probably, due to the site that he's depicting, the church of Sault-au-Récollet. It's called the Visitation, and it's a beautiful little church, the oldest one we have in Montreal Island, and it's worthwhile to visit. You have nice sculpture inside and all that. And so the lightning fall there, and on the other end, you have this blue sky that appear among the clouds. So again, this type of opposition between the right side of the painting and the left side. But the foreground is occupied by something very stable, of course. So this big tree, even it's underlined by, you see under the tree, two little fishermen there, very quiet scenes. You see, as if he wanted to oppose these two layers. Another theme also that could be conducive of this theme of movement, it is the depiction of twilight, for instance, something that in which the lighting of landscape will change rapidly because the night is falling. And we know that Fortin used a technique we call it la manière noire. What he meant it is that you start by blackening your canvas completely, and from there you build with the color. You start with the black, but you had a little bit of color, and so it keeps this kind of strong accent, this kind of somber accent all over the place. Apparently, he was inspired by motif on a carpet, you see, of a dark carpet with bright motif, and he says, okay, why not to transpose that in painting? And so twilight is one of the things that painting is fixing, but suggesting also something that is very impermanent, that will change rapidly. But there is, there's another example of this fascination with change in Fortin's picture. It is, for instance, this depiction of the harbor of Montreal. And the big bridge you see there is the Jacques Cartier Bridge, but in construction. So it permits us to date the painting a little bit precisely because we know when the bridge was built. So about 1925. And you see on the bridge there's a little personage, minuscule, indicating a little bit the direction. But behind that, there's a big dark cloud that billows above the landscape, and because there is a fire there in Montreal. Fortin is always a little bit suspicious of the city. He looks at it from far, and here even he looks at it in fire, you see, in trouble. He is the man who liked the countryside and who liked, la campagne. To be out of the city is wonderful. And even if he lived on Notre Dame Street near Hochelaga Maisonneuve for most of his life, he was always fascinating by, took his bicycle and went out to see these countryside. So when he treats Montreal, or like here, the city, he takes a certain distance from it. It's like, yeah, you are not sure that he's very happy there. Okay, this is kind of a more traditional way. But there is one fascinating thing about Fortin. See, at a certain moment, he is fascinated by cartoons, by film, animated film. And apparently he saw the Walt Disney Fantasia in 42, 43, if I'm not mistaken, about this time. And he says, I must do something like that. I want to make a film also in which I will be able to express some needs. You will see what. And apparently, he went as far to phone to Hollywood and to ask how much it costs to make a film like that. He was answered at the time $300,000 or $400,000, probably a little bit more now, but at the time that was it. But he was serious enough in his aim to do that he asked a firm of architects to draw the plan of a studio. Then instead of going to Hollywood, it was so expensive, to make a studio here in Montreal. And we have this plan. Well, it's not a very convincing image, but we have the plan, we have the name of the architect. In 1953, they make this proposal to Marc-Aurèle Fortin. It was never built, of course, and it's still like that. Why he was so fascinated by this? Well, this is another story. He had one scenario in his head that he wanted to make a cartoon with. And it was a scenario that obsessed him all his life, in fact. It went back when he was a student at the Collège Saint-Laurent, and he won a first prize for it, so he was always very proud of it and repeating that to anybody. It's the only thing that he ever wrote, and it was a kind of story that will attract attention when he was a student. And he wanted to make a theater from it, a play, for a while. and then, no, a cartoon. And apparently he did a lot of drawings. So he understood at the time that you have to make many drawings to make the personage move. Huh? And, but most of them are lost anyway, but he wanted that. The scenario, I will read it to you. I made a sketchy translation of it, and then you will see how important it is when you know a little bit of the biography of Fortin, what was behind. Alors, the scenario read like this. A well-off farmer named Lucas had a son of 25 years old who was engaged with a girl that he intended to marry soon. Elated by this prospect, the father decided to give oneself to his boy and was fancying already a quiet and happy hand near his son and his future daughter-in-law. But in the autumn, tilling the ground, the son caught pneumonia and died. The blow was so severe, the shock so great, that the father lost his mind. Innocent, he spent his days looking for his son, not realizing that he was dead. One of these gray and gloomy days of autumn, the father, Lucas, brought the artist in the country, meaning that he brought Fortin in the country. The artist is Fortin. Suddenly, said Fortin, I hear the old man calling with a plaintive voice, come, Joseph, come. Joseph is the name of the son. He repeated this call half a dozen of times. The cry was like a recitative, funeral song and expressed the whole of human distress. For a long time, under the big dark clouds, I heard the monotonous call of the old man. This scene never left me and make an impression as strong today as then when I felt it for the first time 30 years ago. Yeah? This is the scenario that he was obsessed with. When you know the story of the beginning of, because then we're 30 years behind. If you go 30 years behind when he wrote that, Fortin is not sure of his which choice he will make in life. He wants to paint, but the father is a judge, and not only a judge, but a teacher at McGill University. Le juge Fortin is a considerable man. Huh? And a painter, he says, are you crazy? This is a métier de quêteux. Huh? It's a beggar craft. If you want to be begging all your life, become a painter. And he wanted, of course, his son to become a lawyer and maybe a judge like him. And, but the young Fortin insisted, no, what I'm interested in is painting. And suddenly the son and the father fight, and the father sent the son out of his house, and he says, va-t'en avec des cochonneries. Huh? The cochonneries meaning his paintings and all that. I don't want to see you anymore. I don't want to support you. When you will come back to your sense, you will come back and you will make a lawyer like every human being. But it was very tough. When you think now of the scenario that I just read, you have the same opposition between a father and a son, except that the role seems to be reversed. Now it is the son who died, and not the father. The father survived, but the father turned crazy. Because, in a way, painting is a crazy thing to do, but if you reverse everything, then suddenly it's the opposite. You understand that this story is very profoundly make a lot of echoes in the life of Fortin. And that's why he wanted to make a play with it, or to make a cartoon or whatever, to have it in movement, in a way. This is very, very exceptional and very unexpected, and it was not very well known, this thing, from a man like Fortin, who seems to be so solid and so interested in landscape and things like that, that he had this obsession, but it's understandable. Not only the father of Fortin was a strong man and all that, but he was also, I would say, a man with modern ideas. He was teaching in McGill. He was interested in municipal law. And in fact, he was interested in exactly the opposite of what interested his son. His son was in the countryside. He hated the city. He wanted to go with bicycles and to to be free of any office work and things like that. So they were opposite, but the Fortin went back to what I call old ideas, this attachment to the rootedness of Quebec, to his land and things like that. And Monsieur Fortin, the judge, was a more open mind, and so sometimes you do have conflict between son and father, but not necessarily that the son will be always more modernist than the father. This is an interesting case of the difference between the two of them. So you see, this is a special case. I understand that we cannot generalize that, but it's interesting, this obsession with movement in a painter like Fortin that seems to be much more traditional. The second painter who will be closer to what we saw before will be Alfred Pellan. Alfred Pellan, I present the personage here with this painting, who's not specifically about movement, if you want. It's called, in French, La Surprise Académique. It's done in 1943, at the moment when Pellan went back from France. 1943, you are in the middle of the war. In 40, he came back from France, where he spent 14 years. So Pellan was in contact with all the avant-garde, let's say, in France before the war. He knew Cubism and Futurism and all that. He was close to these movements. He could follow what's happening because he was in Paris at the right time for that. And he came back reluctantly here in Quebec. His family is from Quebec City. And looked for a job, and finally in 1943 got a job at the École des Beaux-Arts, the School of Fine Arts in Montreal. And this is surprising because the head of the school was a man called Charles Maillard. And Maillard was not a modernist. He was interested in more academic type of painting. And so we ask ourselves why to hire a guy like Pellan who will bring une surprise académique in his school. And what we were told it is that Maillard wanted to have at least one guy like this among all these teachers in order to calm a little bit the needs of the students who wanted maybe to have a more modern style and all that. But he says if we have one, we will be able to deal with him. Okay, so Pellan, after being hired by Maillard for the School of Fine Art, paint this picture in which he represents himself like as this kind of clown, turning his head say, upside down, getting out of a box, and by this kind of brusque movement, if you want, making a huge colosseum. I don't know if you see it in gray there. You see his art here, upside down. You see his arm. No? Wait. I think I have the details. That's him here. Okay? So what happened when the comment est-ce qu'on dit, Jack in the pulpit? The little... Jack in the pulpit. Okay. Get out of the box. This big colosseum who looks like in cement or like in clay or I don't know, fall. And okay, this is the academy, if you want. And here is La Surprise Académique. He come out from his box and he reversed this thing. And that's why, first of all, the heart is upside down, if you want. And also that this little, where is this? Ça marche très bien. There is a kind of little animal with many eyes that almost being crushed by this thing that fell near him, and he goes like this. And so if you come back to the whole painting, you see that okay, this is the main subject in the middle, and around this he have all certain autobiographical allusion. Like for instance, his father was a man who was engineer of a train. And he used to go with him to make trips between Montreal and Quebec and back. And so all these symbols that you have, the little wheels and things that you have on the hopper, corner on the right is an allusion to that. And then you have this little boat and all that, because he traveled a lot with the reflect in the water. And then this little instrument here that you see here. So when I showed that for the first time, people said, oh, this, I know what it is, it's for cutting pizza. And no. It's in fact an instrument that were used by painters of the past. Say, for instance, they will pierce like this little holes in a kind of a piece of paper, and then put this piece of paper on a wall where you have a fresco or even a canvas who have been glued on the wall, and then you will blow in this, through these little holes a powder. And then when you remove the paper, you have a line done with dots like this that could be used after for making your composition, especially if you work with fresco or with the big wall. That was an instrument used for that. And then finally, you have the palette of the painter and also its color, and it's clear that this kind of autobiographical information about him. Pelin, okay, was, like I told you, was in Paris, and for a long time he saw Cubism and all that. And indeed, in some of his picture or drawing, you find the direct influence of that. And one of the way to suggest movement among the Cubists, a little bit like with Duchamp that we saw before, it was to superpose, for instance, two views of the same person, one above the other, to suggest a front view and then a profile. If you look on the right side of the face and you eliminate the left side, you will see we have a real profile of a girl. As if she's looking at you facing, and then suddenly she turns her head and you see it in profile. This is a trick that the Cubists will use many, many times, and it's not astonishing of Pelin trying to take advantage of that. It comes, of course, from Picasso, I'm sorry. So, for instance, this portrait of Dora Maar, in which she's almost looking at us from one eye, and then suddenly the other eye not only turns toward the left, but also is like out of his socket in a way. It's like if you have two views of the same person but completely different, and one in which the eye is supposed to be turning in the other direction, but now it turns toward the left. And also, the Cubists have played with that considerably, and it's not, of course, Pelin who have invented this idea. He took it from them, and he adapted to his own art. Like this famous girl before a mirror, who is at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where you see, if you look especially at the girl on the left, not the one who is in the mirror, the profile and the face are quite well organized. So you see we pass rapidly from one to the other. Of course, in the mirror, it's less clear. The mirror, at my age, we finally understood that, is the place when you see yourself aging. And it's a symbol, if you want, of death very often in painting. This image of changing. And so you have less, it's more difficult to read this kind of double face that you have in the picture on the left. Another Pelin, which is like the previous one that I just showed you, but done a little bit later in 1941, this one, and with color, in which not only he suggests a profile and a face, but also almost two characteristics of that girl. She faces us with a certain assurance, and she's sure of herself, and she's much more doubtful when she's in profile, as if you could not only suggest a movement, but also different facets of the temperament of the personage that you are representing. In fact, the eye that you have on the right is bizarre in a way. If you are in a profile, think of it, when you are in profile, your eyes doesn't look like if it was looking in front. And so it's always, the feeling you have, it's a kind of three-quarter view rather than a real profile. As if, again, we are in the middle of a movement, we are going somewhere, and you have this kind of ambiguity. If you want, say, if we take photos like that, you see that on the right photo how an eye looks in profile. It looks like a triangle, exactly like in the Picasso that I was showing just before, and not like a full eye like we have there. And indeed, this is, I would say, more typical, these two eyes looking at you, of what we call a three-quarter view than a real profile. Like in the beautiful drawing of Ingres, of course, you cannot be suspected of cubism, but in which you have this idea of the two eyes are looking at you with a certain symmetry, even if it's not really a face view, even if you are a little bit on the side. Pellin have also tried to do presentation, in my sense, less successful with the same principle, like here, where you have the impression of two heads superposed one to the other. There's no more this flow of one side to the other like we have in the previous picture. They are really superposed one above the other. Even if you have on the right an eye that look at us, and even if the lips seems to prolongate in one face to the other, nevertheless, the profile there stand out too much in a way, and it's maybe less successful than the other one. But on this, let's say, this movement, Pellin tried even a much more elaborated type of picture. It's called in French conciliabule, but this doesn't mean anything in English. I think it should be translated like this. It's gossip. It's two women, even if you see a lot of eyes there. One is sitting. You see the chair on the right side. There's a kind of the part of a chair. And there's another one who leans toward her and is telling her something, some gossips in her ear. This is more or less the subject. But to show that the going up and down and going one side to the others, he multiplied like this the face. You have many profiles, and you have many faces also possible. And even the body of these two women are difficult to read. You have a breast that seems to go in that direction and another in the other direction. Are they belonging to the same person, the two? And then what sense you can make of these hands that fall in up like this up to her thigh? It's as if, because of the movement, it's blurred a little bit. We don't know exactly where one person has stopped and the other begin. But it's certainly through a reflection on movement that Pellin was interested in a subject like that. Even the faces that you see in the bottom are playing with this also. They are looking up, down, on the side, and say as if these little faces are animated also. He made, of course, one example was very easy to understand, the juggler, in which the eyes are following the things that he's playing with, and the same with the mouth, smiling and then being more sad. And this is tapestry. It's not a painting, if you want, but it's based on a drawing of Pellin. So he was certainly interested by movement, and he had also a tradition to go back to, I mean, Cubism and Futurism. He could relate to that and make his own version of it. But sometimes he tries something different. Like here, for instance, the spiral, you have a kind of line that goes like this, like a spiral, if you want a little bit, all over the place, and is almost abstract. You don't have any subject matter like we had in the other painting. And as if the eye following the line, the black line that crosses all the surface here, will put movement in the painting. As if you ask from the onlooker to add this feeling of movement that you cannot do, of course, in the painting itself. And this idea of eye movement, adding movement to the object that we're looking at, have been studied very well scientifically by a man called Yarbus, who's a Russian scientist who worked in Moscow. And he, for instance, he succeeded to put on the eyes of a person a little device that makes a ray of light that could register all the movement of your eye when you are looking at something. So here what you see is the statue of the Nefertiti, the famous Egyptian queen. And on the right, it is all the movement that the human eye will do spontaneously when he looks at that. And what is surprising, it is the eye movement are not at random. They are more or less following the profile of the statue and concentrating on two places, more on the eyes, let's say, and in the ear also. And indeed, when you look at it, it's the two prominent aspects in this profile is beautiful, and the big ear in the middle. And he was able to measure this movement. And okay, nothing is more static, of course, than a sculpture of Nefertiti, but the eye will himself add to it. And it's like when you read a text, your eye do exactly the same. We don't read slowly like this, like a kind of regular movement. We go by saccade. We read a little bit, and then the eye change rapidly and stop a little bit further. So each time you have a circle there, you have a little stop, and each time you have a line, you have a text. We'll put the text in German, I think, for not that we will be distracted with the meaning of it, but just with this kind of eye movement thing. And in the Pella, if you remember, this line, this black line, is also with little dots, with little black dots, who could be a little bit like a depiction of this saccade. The same guy that I was mentioning, Yarbus, I've used painting of, in Russia, of course, because he's a Russian scientist, to demonstrate that not only the eye doesn't look at a painting at random, but if you give the onlooker certain command, let's say, the movement of the eye will be different. And you start with this painting, with a very tragic in a way. It's done by Ilya Repin. And it's called, he was not expected. Okay, who he is? This man who entered in the room there is a prisoner who was in Siberia for many, many years, and suddenly I've been freed from the camp there and come back home. So what Repin wanted to do is to show the reaction of each people there. You have, for instance, the whole woman in front is the mother of the prisoner, and you have his wife there who is at the piano, and you have two kids. Now, one seems to recognize her father, and the other no. They are scared, you don't know. And what Yarbus did, he gave different command to an onlooker, and he noted the movement of the eyes depending on what he's asking them. Okay? For instance, if you ask, okay, let's say, on the right side on the top there, estimate material circumstances of the family. So meaning that what he wants you to concentrate on, it is, are they poor, are they rich, do they have nice furniture and things like that. So the eyes will go toward what is suggested here according to the command that we give. Let's see if you take the other one here on the left, he will ask, what is the age of the personage? Whoop, right away you go to the faces and you try to figure out that this, the old woman, this is the man, this is the kids are younger and all that. Depending of the, I would say almost the mood of the onlooker, the movement of the eye will be different. And this is, of course, it was studied, let's say, scientifically, but it's very interesting in terms of what we can add to the experience of looking at painting by the very movement of our eyes, that we can do that. And indeed, when you go toward abstract art, you do have always this possibility of adding movement to it just by the movement of your eyes. I thought of this famous Bordeaux painting, it's called The Seagull. You know why the title here was given in English by Bordeaux, who didn't know much English anyway, and because it was sold to the National Gallery, and at the time, Mr. Bob Hubert was not speaking a word of French, so he would not have understood what was la mouette. And so Bordeaux looked in this little dictionary and said, oh, it's seagull, okay, so we will keep this title in English, and it's titled like that, the National Gallery. And it is, in fact, if you follow the black spot from the bottom to the top, it could be evocative of a flight of a seagull, if you want. The movement that we make with our eyes through the sky like this resemble a little bit of the movement we will have if we were following a seagull flying. In certain cases, Bordeaux even indicate by the title the way to look at it, the movement the eye should do. Like here, the title is 3 plus 4 plus 1. So what he suggests is the first thing you look at is the big arc done by the 3 big spots starting from the left upper corner up to the right lower corner, and with a big one in the between. Then 4 are the 4th spot that you have on the left, and finally 1 is the little one that you see completely at the other. So meaning that by the title he suggests a reading like this, and then like that, and then finally like this. As if the title itself would indicate what he expects from the eye of the onlooker. This possibility, of course, was after exploited by the so-called post-automatistes, the other generation after Bordeaux and Riopelle, for very gestural type of painting like this, as if the gesture of applying the paint, like in this Rita Le Tendre picture, will be a trace of movement. And even looking at it, you will find it a little bit the same way. It's based on, when you think of the importance of gesture in modern art and things like that, it refers also to this idea that to express something, words and content and ideas is not enough. You need more than that. And people who knew that well, it is the orators of the past. When Cicero says that you need action, you don't need only a kind of clear case that clear speculatively in your mind, but you have also to move, you have also with your voice, the way you will modulate it, will add more conviction to what you are saying. And so this action could be, translated also in this type of work. So we make one step further with the work of Jacques Urtubise. Urtubise have made a series of paintings in the 1960s and 65 in which this idea of splash, if you want, of movement is very clearly expressed. He had this fantasy of giving name of girls to all his paintings, Clara and Cassia and everything. I don't know, because of course it had nothing to do with the painting itself, but it's a way to classify them. Say, where is Clara? Okay, it's here. It's easier than say number 1, number 2, number 3. And so it have nothing to do with the picture. So it's divided in 2 parts. It's very easy to understand. Well, you have this black block on the right, and then you have this splash coming to it, almost touching it. But when you look at the painting carefully, you will see that sometimes you have the feeling that the painting was all black to start with, and then he covered half of it with white, and then he cut with an X-Acto the shape of the splash there and remove it. And you have then not at all a spontaneous picture like you could imagine, anybody can do that. You just throw painting on the right side of it, and that's it. But it's so controlled that you could say that it's done after the effect. He will make many splashes, and he will choose one, and then he will transpose it like this on the painting. And I understood that when I saw, maybe this is hard to believe that he could work like this, because there's little dots and things. But what you do with a painting like this one, which is called Carina. Well, with Carina, you have the impression that one spot of painting that you see, let's say, on the left, have been not only repeated, but also reversed. So in order to manipulate this spot of picture that way, you have to be able to repeat it and to repeat it carefully, because if you look, the same little spot are repeated on each side and all that. So it's not at all like it looks, like things done by a splash, like he suggests, but much more controlled than that, but also very efficient to show, for instance, here an expansion or an explosion, if you want, of painting. And he will use, for instance, again, this idea of symmetrical shape, but reverse. This is the same shape twice, but one recto and the other verso, and put side by side. And he had there, of course, en plus, this kind of electrical type of color, which is this pink and yellow was very intense. And it's always much more efficient, of course, when you see the real thing instead of just a slide. But again, the color could add to this effect. And say, after a while, I think he could play with that endlessly. He suggests things to many view, probably 6 stripes like this one beside the other, of the same movement, but cut as if it goes so fast that we skip few of them. See, we cannot see the continuity between them, but they are also played with and reversed and changed in color and everything like that. Okay, I want to finish my presentation with modern artists of today. I'm a little bit embarrassed, and you will understand why. It's somebody that is from Israel but live in Canada, and happened to be my wife. And this is for student here. It's this thing you are not allowed to do in a public lecture in the museum. Present the work of your wife. So you're not supposed to. But you will see by the work that she did that were very close to my subject matter. I could not resist. What it is? It is a drawing made on a huge piece of paper, which is about 10 meters long. And you see here the bags on the top of the picture. And it's done in Israel, in a place it's called Aklit, and it's near Haifa. If you see the map of Israel, it goes like this, and Haifa is on the top. A little bit south of Haifa, you have Aklit. And it's an old quarry was there, abandoned, because all the stone that he could work with are disappeared. And what Pnina did, it is to put this drawing to put the paper on the floor, and then to note with a pencil, let's say, the movement of shadow on this thing. Because you will have a big wall of rock on the right side, let's say, and the sun will move. And since it's 10 feet long, 10 meter long, the time you do one line, the sun have moved a little bit, and then when you do this second line, you are not exactly at the same position. And slowly, like this, you fill up all the page. I'll show you a few. First of all, the place is very peculiar. It's there's nobody there. It's like if you were in the middle of the desert, and you see our paper on the floor there, and the things that project the shadow on the paper is this big wall. And what happened, the shadow on the ground are not exactly sharp. They are like this a little bit. So the painter has to take a decision which exactly our line will be. En gros is the same thing that you see there, but there is a certain opposition between umbra and penumbra. There is a kind of transition between two that gives certain freedom. So you see how it is. The paper is on the floor. The big wall is there, throwing its shadow, and progressively the lines are adding one to the other. On the spot, she works with a pencil, but in the studio after, she could put the color, like you see red and yellow. And each session spans a certain time, 3 hours a session. So you have to be careful to put the paper exactly the same place that you were before. So you work the whole morning, you come back, then you come back the other day. And that's why my regretted friend, because he's died now, René Payan, who wrote an article about this, called it corpochronography. Because the body involvement, this is very, very hard, because you are on the ground all the time trying to follow the movement of the sun, and on 10 meter long, and then doing it again and again and again, and filling for three layers. Here you see the shadow. I've covered almost all the paper, and it's the sign that you finish. So it's after 3 hours, that's where you stand. Maybe it's difficult to see, but you have mainly two colors there, the red and the orange, and the rest is, you see traces with a pencil. That's it, that will be finished in the studio after. Another example of the same time, when you get the principle, Plina did a lot of these drawings. One of the important one is at the Musée d'Art Contemporain, but not yet in the Musée des Beaux-Arts. But now you see exactly what's happening. So it's a little wall coming from on an archaeological site in Megiddo, and very ancient, the wall itself. And we remember that when she was drawing that, suddenly a group of religious Jewish students from a yeshiva came with a rabbi, and they were not sure that this is permitted or not. As you know, the Bible says not to represent God or represent anything. So the rabbi looked at this, so this is kosher, there's no problem. It's abstract, we don't know what it is. You can admire it without problem. But that's one of the problems, of course, when you work in public places, you do have the relationship with the in Athlete, in the quarry, she was very much alone. But there, it's an archaeological site, it's visited by tourists and all that, so it was a little bit more complicated. So you see the progress of the shadow, and let's say now it's almost finished. And she made also, when you get this passion of noting movement, a little bit like my Monsieur Marais that I was presenting at the beginning with this photo of birds and things like that, everything could become a subject matter to be depicted, like for instance the trace done by the wave coming at shore. And what you see on the floor is a series of little rocks that imitate more or less from photograph the movement of the waves reaching shore, and the works on the wall also are based on these observations. So that's the end of my lecture today, but don't applaud me, applaud the artist. She's there in the back, and we will stand a little bit. Thank you. And so we will see each other next time. I will not speak anymore of family, don't worry, but we will speak of the theme of time, of duration. Again, as a kind of challenge for programs. Okay.